Hi, I'm Renee Edmondson, Director of Academic Tech Design at CRUX Solutions, and I'm here with Al Lawrence, our Vice President of Quality and Training. And today we're going to talk to you a little bit about considerations for designing for the long haul.
You know, Renee, when we look at that long haul, and people ask, well, how far out should I start planning before I invest or purchase or design some new physical security system or some new communication system for my school? They always want to know, how far out should I be? You know, and of course the consultant answer is always, well, it depends, right? Could be 6 months, could be 12 months, could be 5 years. And I think that long haul process has to be, it's got to be documented. You know, it's a roadmap, essentially. And we can't get from point A to point B without knowing how we're going to get there, what tools we're going to need, what training we're going to need, what kind of financial investment we're going to need, and then to know we've actually arrived at where we want it to be. So I've always felt that, you know, for us, when we look at the long haul for our clients and we look at the development of that roadmap, cost and time, big factors. But there are also things that I think we try to help our clients understand, that not everything requires a lot of cost. There can be some things that you could leave a planning meeting and start the very next day on how to improve safety and security and things like that at your campus or in your school district. But I also think it's important that, for example, we want to initiate a new access control system for our schools. Well, part of that long haul process and plan should be not just to think about the system, but also to think about what else is that system going to touch with my building. You know, how old are my doors? Have my doors been maintained properly? Or am I going to have costs with new hardware? Or am I going to have costs associated with how the system does what it does and blends with that building environment? So there's a lot of things to start thinking about in that process. And, you know, when you're doing surveillance, you know, you don't just look at the surveillance cameras and the system. You're also looking at things like, you know, lighting, where are the cameras going to go, what are they going to do, and that sort of thing. Would you agree?
Yes, that, and also landscaping and understanding the long-term maintenance plans for landscaping around the building exterior as well. Definitely,
definitely. That can be difficult at times for some of our clients, because when they look at their security systems, or, you know, all security is a priority for school districts, but there are limitations. And I think sometimes what our clients really need is not just involvement from third-party consultants such as ourselves to help kind of lift them out of the trees, if you will, and to help establish those priorities. Okay, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do this. What problems are we trying to solve along the way? What's our first top priority? What's our second? You know, and sometimes those are driven by cost or training or that sort of thing. But there are also other things that, you know, we need to look at, and other inputs that our clients should take into consideration. The authority having jurisdiction, the fire marshal, the police department, talking to their teachers and their custodial staff, you know, people who are there not only during the hours of the day, but after the hours of the day, I think are all critical as part of that roadmap process. You know, and one example I wanted to talk to you about today is the emergency responder communication enhancement systems, the distribution amplifiers and the things that go into buildings that allow first responder radios to function. And from your experience and your expertise, what are some of the things you think that clients should be thinking about when it comes to what we call ERCES?
Right. Well, I think it is important to begin planning early in the phases of design. A lot of times, you know, we see the drivers of needing an ERCES system to be the locality, how close the building might be to public safety towers. We see the topography in between the 2 points that matters, but really we see one of the main drivers can be the building materials. So you might not know that you need an ERCES system until walls are constructed and glazing windows are installed. So a lot of times it's not till the very final stages of construction that you see that an ERCES system is needed. So we try to plan ahead, right? You might want to carry an allowance throughout the construction process, just knowing that that might be an eventuality. But you can also plan things like pathways, consider space planning, the fire ratings of those pathways and spaces, making sure that you're planning ahead for electrical and additional circuits in the future, backup electricity, backup plans. So there's a lot of things that you can plan for early in the phases of design that could definitely benefit the project later on.
And I also think it's important for clients to understand that, okay, I've got this system in place, now what? Yes, my fire marshal's happy, their radios all work, but what our clients also have to understand as part of that process is that there is a maintenance process to these things. And sometimes that maintenance could be the fact that with the enhancement system for the radios, they have to be checked annually. And because there are so many things that could impact that signal quality. And you touched on it, the topography, maybe the carrier has decided to move towers and suddenly the source for the donor antenna that's sitting up on that roof has completely changed. And now we find ourselves in a pickle. And maintenance can take other forms. It could be software maintenance. If you're making big investments in surveillance systems and access control systems, because a lot of those are moving to the cloud or moving to, they're all software-driven type solutions, they all have different licensing impacts. And it's not just the upfront costs that are associated with, we bought this system, we got 5-year licenses, we paid a lot of money for all this to work. But after the end of the 5 years, there is a budgetary impact that's going to come back around for our clients to have to deal with. And so I think it's wise to think about, and we've said it a long time, everything we build and design, the clients have to maintain. And part of that is the fiscal impact that some of these systems can bring. When it comes to whether it's a surveillance system, an access control system, whatever, one of the greatest things I find about today's platforms is their ability to mix and mingle, if you will, with third-party applications, other systems that are already in our facilities, our paging system, for example, other sorts of apps and mass communication systems, so that when I push this button, that means I get that response from an officer, I get that response from a system in my building, a paging announcement, perhaps. And I think it's important when clients are still part of that roadmap process that they understand all these little channel ways that come back here, So before you make a major investment in some solution, you want to know that it works well with third-party vape sensors and motion detection and just there's so many different components that can come in. But when it comes to surveillance, everyone says, I have a camera and that camera is going to record and I'm going to look at the recording. They're really only using a small percentage of what those systems can offer. And how do you think, what is your opinion, or what do you try to get clients to think of when you look at the analytics of these types of systems and the other things that they can do for them?
Well, you brought up earlier understanding the policies and procedures. It's not always about the devices necessarily. It's not always about the physical measures. And I think it's important to understand, one, how your policies and procedures, creating them, adopting them, how you communicate those, how you adapt those over time, and making it something that's regularly discussed within the district. So as new technology is adopted within the district, it definitely should initiate a continued conversation on how our policies and procedures need to be adapted.
And that's a good point, because sometimes people go, okay, I have my roadmap for success. I'm going to go from here to there, and these are the things that are going to happen. But sometimes year 3 of 5, some new technology comes along. Could be a new state mandate may come in, from local government or state government or maybe national that says, hey, our schools should be doing these things when it comes to emergency planning or how these systems should work. So I think it's important to always remember that even if you have, or once you get a roadmap, that there's certain checkpoints along the way that may go, hey, I just saw this new technology. Can we incorporate that in our system? And can we go back to the last 2 years of campuses that have gotten the system and bring them all up to speed at the same time? So I think it's important to also set those milestones along the way that says, hey, okay, we're year 3 of 5. Let's all have a conversation again. How are we doing? What's new? How are we implementing the systems? What lessons have we learned along the way? Because you don't want to get to year 5 and look back and then all of a sudden have all these lists of questions, So roadmaps are always going to be, they have to be adaptive. And what you said about processes is spot on, because I've introduced this technology. How does my staff, how do my first responders, how do my students all have to perform now that these systems are in place? So do you see clients, when it comes to processes, do you feel that that's kind of the overlooked elephant in the room sometimes? And maybe people aren't thinking about all the things that could be done?
We need to take a step back and look at where are our risks, where are our threats, what is the greatest likelihood of where I can make the greatest impact. So I do see that as a primary driver.
No, that's good. And what you said there, the core principles of risk management, because even I'll go back to that development of the roadmap. We have those conversations early on. What are the threats and the risks and the likelihood of those things occurring, and what are the costs if they do, and how much does it cost to mitigate that? But as we go through that process, there's always going to be some change. There's going to be a new risk. It could be a cybersecurity risk. It could be a physical security risk. It's important to always maintain the fact that you're always going to have these risks around you. But as you go through that plan and as you go through the map, again, you always have to have that touch point along the way to say, has anything else changed? Is there something else to keep me awake at night, so to speak? And how are we going to adapt? And hey, can my system do this and do that? So I think processes cannot be left off the table when developing that roadmap of any solution or any system that may be coming along.
And I think another angle that's very important is understanding the role and responsibility of each person within the district staff. So understanding if we roll out a new, say, an access control platform, who's responsible for owning that system, who's responsible for assisting in that, and who needs to be aware. And you might have one person that's doing the programming, maybe IT is responsible for the programming, or you might have somebody that's responsible for developing what the access control schedule should be. That might be campus leadership, it might be another entity. So I think everyone understanding and having documented and continuing to revisit their role in maintaining that system is very important as well.
That is a very good point, and I have seen where campuses, districts, took on a new access control system, and the scheduling and all those things were funneled to a single individual, and it just became too much. And you had to think about, okay, what's that individual going to be responsible for, whether it's IT or security or facilities, but what am I going to be able to push down to, say, the campus level? So maybe IT, they're worried about protecting the system and the integrity of the system. But to the campuses, give me some flexibility in setting those schedules and doing those things for activities and things that are occurring on my campus during the school year. And school districts have that challenge because, we're not just brimming with staff. And so we have to think about what can we push down to other areas or levels. And I also think that sometimes you got to look and see, okay, what can the technology do for me? That right now I'm taking up hours of, you know, somebody else on my team, or the things I could automate, or the things that could be done where I don't have to manually go in and look for these things. I can just tell it, hey, generate this report or generate this information for me every week, every day, every month, type of thing. So I think it's also important not just to think about that, how we break down the responsibilities to the specific shareholders and the stakeholders, but also to take a look at the system and say, what can it do for me and help me save time when I go about the day-to-day operations of the school. So kind of circling back, and I know we talked about several different things, from emergency communication systems to you know, security, but also how all those parts and pieces are at play in helping to improve safety and security with our school districts, and how all of those things need to be looked at from all sorts of different angles of ownership during that entire, you know, roadmap process. Because I think if you fail to do that, I think you're going to find yourself at your destination, and you're not going to know that you got there. And when you did get there, you may not be exactly feeling like you got your full investment out of the time. So hopefully, you know, people will think about that next time, and they'll have a good outcome. So we're all about happy outcomes. But anyway, well, we hope this information's been useful for you, and we thank you for joining us in our conversation today about planning for the long haul when it comes to school safety and security. And we hope you have a great day. Thank you.